A single spark ignites the heart. But if we turn when justice calls, the chains we forge will bind us all. When truth is silence, when lies take hold, the cost is freedom, the soul grows cold. No one stands tall while another must fall. Freedom for one depends on freedom for all. We're mavericks of freedom, rebels in the fight, defending every voice, defending every right. For the moment we falter, the moment we stall, we lose our own freedom when we let others fall. You can't stand free while others kneel. When justice fades, it's freedom they steal. An innocent condemned, a crime unspoken, and with it the bond of liberty is broken. No tyrant rules without our consent. Oppression thrives where silence is spent. Stand for the weak, the silence the small, or freedom will crumble for us all. We're mavericks of freedom, guardians of the light, fighting for the truth, for what is just and right. For the rights of one are the rights of all. We rise or we fall by answering the call. Even those we may oppose deserve the rights we all uphold. For if we deny them what is fair, we build our own prison in despair. The fight's not easy, it never will be, but justice for one is the key to be free. We stand as mavericks, together we strive, defending the rights that keep freedom alive. We're mavericks of freedom, rebels in the fight, upholding every truth, protecting every right. When one is oppressed, we're all in the thrall. Freedom for one depends on freedom for all. So take a stand, let your courage rise. Defend the truth, don't compromise. For the soul of the world, the writing's on the wall. Freedom for one depends on freedom for
Greetings, Mavericks and new viewers. Tonight, direct and live from the Maverick News Network World Studios. This is Maverick News with Rick Walker.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Maverick News Channel. Lots to share with you tonight. We're going to the polls in Canada. Election imminent. We're told Mark Carney, Canada's new Prime Minister, will call an election this Sunday. The big day is supposed to be April 28th. What did I tell you? Well, what did I say? I said before that I thought we were going to go to the polls probably late spring, early summer. Here we go. Plus, the war in Ukraine rages on in spite of the partial ceasefire that Donald Trump orchestrated with Vladimir Putin, whatever that is. Also, the Bank of Canada governor speaking to, I believe, the Chamber of Commerce out in Calgary. We're going to pick up some of that. And Mark Carney, the new PM, was out west as well in Alberta, met with Alberta's Premier, Danielle Smith. And the fireworks, they are a-flying, and my chair is breaking, even as I sit here. tonight. So that was a wild ride, and we've got a wild ride set for you tonight. So buckle up. There's lots to share on the other side of this, and I'll try and keep my chair from collapsing for the duration of the broadcast. I shall return.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Maverick News. Expose lies and tell truth. The world is watching.
All right, so we're going to get into this election call. But before we do that, pretty big news out of Ukraine, Russia. According to Ukrainian officials, in a dramatic escalation of the ongoing conflict in the Ukraine-Russia war, Ukraine has launched a significant drone attack on a Russian military airbase deep inside Russian territory. So much for the ceasefire, although the partial ceasefire was really supposed to be restricted or focused on energy infrastructure. So this doesn't really qualify for that. But this strike targeted the Angels Air Base in the Saratov region, about 435 miles from the front lines. It happened early this morning. We have video to share with you. Let me see if I can find that video. Here we go. Yes. Okay, this is what it looked like. Massive explosion.
Это нихуя. Там что-то ёбнуло пиздец. Это нихуя.
Massive
Там что-то ёбнуло пиздец.
explosion. So it's a significant airstrike because they apparently use this to station and launch their nuclear bombers from this. And there were secondary detonations reported in addition to the primary detonation, suggesting damage to ammunition stockpiles there. The airbase is home to Russia's nuclear-capable strategic bombers, including the Tu-160, which have been used to launch missile strikes on Ukraine throughout the war. Russia's defense ministry claims it shot down 132 Ukrainian drones over several regions, though it's unclear how many actually reached their target. You can see that whatever hit there, they made it count. Some speculation they may have been using one of these new homegrown missiles that Ukraine has been developing and starting to build domestically. The Engels Air Base is home to Russia's nuclear-capable strategic bombers. Now, the governor of Saratov confirmed a fire at the airfield and said that nearby residents were evacuated for safety. And as you see from that video footage, which is circulating online, generating a lot of views, there was this massive explosion, almost like a mushroom cloud. It was that powerful. The strike comes amid these delicate talks of a partial ceasefire, which I'm not so sure it's even really holding at this point. But we'll see if this has any impact on the negotiations moving ahead. Ukrainian authorities have vowed to continue targeting Russian military assets, calling the air base strike a key launch point for attacks on their civilians. So as we learn more, we will keep you updated. And the other major story tonight, of course, for our Canadian audience and our cousins, relatives, friends, neighbors in the United States, Canada's going to the polls, folks. Yes, indeed. Well, everybody kept saying that Trudeau is a dictator and we don't have a democracy and he'll stay in power forever. I said, don't worry. We have to have an election. It is so written in the Constitution, which some people think we don't have. But we're going to the polls. Mark Carney is expected to make the announcement Sunday, and then we're going to have a short campaign. The word is, and this is being widely talked about tonight, April 28th is the big day. And I'll tell you, Carney is in campaign mode. Pierre Poilievre is in campaign mode. They're all in campaign mode. They have been for some time. Of course, now that Carney has taken the reins of the Liberal Party and is in the position of the Prime Minister's office, now that he has the reins of power, he's going to want to be sitting in the House of Commons. Now, you see, he can't sit as an MP during question period or participate fully the way an elected member of Parliament would, because he has not yet been elected to office, which is a major incentive to go have an election when you become a prime minister in this fashion. When you become the leader of the governing party, you automatically become the prime minister. But a lot of restrictions on what you can do. So that's why we're going to the polls, folks. And Carney went out to Alberta today, that hotbed of controversy, and was there for a couple of reasons. He met with Alberta's Premier, Danielle Smith, which we will come back to in a moment. But he was also out there to make a big announcement. He is going to eliminate, he says, if elected, his government will eliminate the GST sales tax on all new homes for first-time home buyers under $1 million, which would really stimulate housing starts. It would inject life into the housing market and make it easier for first-time home buyers to realize that dream of owning a home. And this all happening, obviously, as a response to not just the election, but also Canada's housing crisis, brought on by short supply and rising immigration levels. Supply and demand, simple as that. And this is one way to stimulate both the supply and demand, because it makes homes more affordable, provides more incentive for builders to build. Of course, getting the red tape out of the way, that's also part of the issue. Canadian home builders have, depending on the province, all provinces really, a massive amount of red tape regulations that they have to navigate. Building codes. I mean, it is. I went to a home builders association meeting here locally a few years ago, and they had a whole presentation on the rules, the regulations, the permits that are required to just build a home, and it is mind-boggling. the codes, the plumbing, the electrical, the carpentry, everything has to be just so tickety-boo, or you're going to be in violation of things. And you have to get the permits to build too, land permits and so on. It's a minefield. But here's Carney today out in Calgary.
It's time to build. We need to get housing supply up. In fact, we need to double housing supply on an annual basis. We need to get that supply up so we can bring costs down. We need to build more at a faster pace. So my government will stimulate innovation and productivity and sustainability by promoting new technologies such as modular and prefabricated homes that speed up completion times, lower costs for builders and buyers. We're working to remove barriers by cutting red tape, levies, development costs and chargers that the mayor just mentioned, reducing taxes, accelerating permitting approvals, and working directly with mayors. And this is really a story of success in those cities that are engaged, such as Edmonton, working directly with the cities through the Housing Accelerator Fund. It's made an impact here. It's making an impact across the country from Quebec City to Saskatoon, I know from personal experience. And the other thing we need to do, and I'd like to thank colleagues for being here who are building these homes, we need to grow the construction sector workforce, accelerate training and apprenticeship programs, improve the mobility of skilled labor. There's more than enough work right now in Edmonton, but we want to build up the work across the country, and we want the skilled workers to be able, if they so decide, to immediately go to another part of Canada and work there without any red tape or hassle, and that's going to be a focus when I meet provincial premiers tomorrow. Because it is a time to build, we are going to have a multi-decade building of this country, and it is going to be a great time to have a career in the trades. Now, in the coming weeks, we're going to announce a lot more on further increasing housing supply, but I want to just concentrate on the other side of the equation for a moment, which is how can we help Canadians, particularly younger Canadians, buy their first homes right now. So what I'm announcing today is that my new government will eliminate the GST for first-time home buyers on all new and substantially renovated homes under $1 million. Now, this is a big deal because first-time home buyers are the major purchasers of new and substantially renovated homes. This can provide up to $50,000 in savings for families entering the housing market. It means that all first-time home buyers will need to save less for a deposit, and they'll be able to move in sooner. And it will allow more first-time home buyers to realize their dream of home ownership, whether you're a nurse here in Edmonton, a teacher in Red Deer, or an equipment operator on the oil patch. Nous devons construire plus de logements, plus vite pour faire baisser les coûts. Notre gouvernement va.
Okay, so we're not going to stick with this too long. We're just going to pull out. So as significant as that may seem, now he can only do that if he gets elected. And it's important to note the Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, already made that promise. So he's copying. He's copying what Pierre Poilievre already promised to do on the Conservative side. And that was months ago that Poilievre announced that. So, I don't know. Maybe he's... I think it'll be done, or something close to it. They're both promising to do it. That will happen. It needs to happen. It makes sense. But I think also what Carney is doing is he's cherry-picking or focusing on issues that he can... used to take the wind out of Poilievre's sails. That's why he axed the tax the day he was sworn in by signing that piece of paper, which really wasn't axing the tax because it's still on the books. It looks like they're just maybe not going to collect it starting on the collection date. They just revised it to zero but left it on and I don't know. You can't just get rid of the tax that way. because he doesn't have the authority to just sign an executive order the way that Trump does. He can do it through an order in council. I don't know. I believe that, at least in the short term, it will not be collected, and they'll follow through with that because there's some technical ways they can get it done. But the point is, we have to go through this election, and then they can actually get back into Parliament and to go through the proper steps to pass legislation, pass budgets, make amendments to the budget, and so forth, and conduct the affairs of government in a proper manner. But until then, we're getting this sort of strange mishmash of politicking combined with governing. And, it's funny. It's not funny. It is funny to see these politicians politicking, campaigning. Here's Carney today. He went out onto the ice with the Edmonton Oilers, and he went for a skate. And I saw a picture of him first. I think it was in the National Post, and he looked awkward. I think they probably picked a picture of him that intentionally made him look a little bit awkward. These politicians, they do these things as photo ops to try to make themselves look kind of cool. And what I'm noticing here already, right out of the gate with Mark Carney, is he's trying to campaign in a very American style. And he's doing things in a very presidential style. That's what that flourish of the pen was when he canceled, or said that he canceled, the carbon tax on day one. And then this kind of thing reminds me of Obama playing basketball, Bill Clinton playing the saxophone on, I think it was David Letterman. And now here's Carney trying to look cool and athletic and energetic. He's out on the ice skating with the Edmonton Oilers. Now I have to say, he looks kind of nimble out there for an old guy. And he comes down the right, he shoots, he scores! Empty net. They must have pulled their goalie. You got to be careful doing that stuff, man. I'm telling you, because it can come back and bite you on the you know what. It reminds me of, oh man, here it is. Here, I finally found it. Okay, do you remember the old Canadian Alliance Party? That was sort of like a Stockwell Day, conservative leader at the time, as part of the old Canadian Alliance Party, as I recall. This one stuck in my head. He kind of bit the dust as a politician. His whole political career went right down the tubes in Canada when he pulled this jet ski stunt, trying to make himself look cool like that, and it just backfired. Here's a picture of him doing that. This was years and years ago, and he pulled up on the beach for a news conference on this jet ski, and it was so long ago I don't remember all the particulars, but the media ate him alive after that, and he as cool as he tried to look, it ended up just making him look kind of nerdy and fake. Yeah, you got to be really careful. That killed Stockwell Day. Just and Danielle Smith met with Mark Carney, Premier of Alberta, met with the new PM. And, oh yeah, she's talking tough out there. I don't know what to make of her at this point. It's, she's obviously doing things to appease, placate her base. Probably people she owes politically in Alberta. And she's trying to, I think, read the room out in Alberta. What do the voters want? What do people expect of me? What do I have to do? And so she's very diplomatic with Trump and very hard with the government. So after meeting with Carney today, she posts this on social media. She says, at his request, I met with Prime Minister Mark Carney. Today we had a very frank discussion in which I made it clear that Albertans will no longer tolerate the way we've been treated by the federal Liberals over the past 10 years. I have provided a specific list of demands the next Prime Minister, regardless of who that is, must address within the first 6 months of their term to avoid an unprecedented national unity crisis. Yeah, yeah, we have a national unity crisis out there, folks. We do. And I have some pretty strong views on why, and I don't really like what I'm seeing, because I see a whole lot of meddling and maybe even some unethical behavior going on. But we'll get into that a little deeper as this broadcast goes on. And she says, so what are these demands that she's making? Well, guaranteeing Alberta full access to oil and gas corridors to the northeast and west, repealing Bill C-69, also known as the No New Pipelines Act, lifting the tanker ban off the BC coast, eliminating the oil and gas emissions cap, which is a production cap, scrapping the so-called clean electricity regulations, ending the prohibition on single-use plastics, abandoning the net zero car mandate, returning oversight of the industrial carbon tax to the provinces. That's a big one, because Carney, as much as he eliminated the consumer carbon tax, or so he said with a stroke of the pen on day one, he also made it pretty clear that the federal government is planning on using an industrial carbon tax to sort of weave the whole carbon tax into the background, into the hidden costs of goods and services, so that you don't really see it. You pay it because it's built into the prices of things. It's all built into the supply chain. Businesses end up paying it, and then you, as a result, pay a higher price upon consumption. And then lastly, it says halting the federal censorship of energy companies. Federal censorship. I also made it clear, she says, that Alberta, as owner of the resource, will not accept an export tax or restriction of Alberta's oil and gas to the United States, and that our province is no longer agreeable to subsidizing other large provinces who are fully capable of funding themselves. Lastly, I made it clear that federal mismanagement of Jasper and Banff national parks resulted in last year's tragic wildfire in Jasper and is endangering Banff, and the situation must be rectified immediately. With the federal election about to be called, I encourage all Albertans to get involved in what is likely one of the most pivotal and important elections in our nation's history, and to support the party and candidates they have consistently advocated for, freeing Alberta from federal overreach and the repeated economic attacks our province has faced from Ottawa over the past 10 years. And so which party is that? I guess the Conservatives? Although these days I'm not sure. I'm not sure who the good guys and the bad guys are anymore. That's why in my Substack article that I wrote 2 days ago, I wrote it some time ago, posted it 2 days ago, I said that Poilievre's call for transparency from Carney, he needs to own that himself. All these politicians need to be more transparent about who's funding them, who's influencing them. And I want to know, are any of these politicians being influenced by U.S. interests? Do they have investments that would put them in a possible conflict of interest? A lot of these investments, these holdings, even blind trusts, we don't know about them because of the way the Canadian regulations are written. So I've said for a long time we need more transparency across the board. And while Poilievre is saying that Carney needs to not just follow the rules, but lay out all his assets for all to see and go beyond what is required through the Ethics Commissioner and the law, and come clean with Canadians. And I say, you first, Mr. Poilievre, you second, Mr. Carney, and Or maybe just do it all at the same time. And Jagmeet Singh and Elizabeth May and anybody who's leading a political party, let's get your finances right out on the table, everything. What's your income? Where's it coming from? If you want to be the prime minister, I think Canadians need to know if you are being influenced in any way or if you have any kind of a conflict of interest and to what degree. And even if, everybody has investments, right? And so if you have a mutual fund, you might not even, I'm just saying, right now, especially when we're at this critical juncture, Canadians need to know, and it is not clear. It really isn't. And we'll just go back here to this clip here. And, the media today, too, very biased on any side. It's like I'm having a very hard time finding anybody out there that's really practicing balanced journalism. It's all very slanted these days. So the Western Standard, very conservative. So today at that news conference, Western Standard reporter, kind of, I'd say this was a pointed question. I'll use that adjective. Okay, pointed. From Mark Carney. And I'm not sure if this is even a fair question, honestly, because Carney went over to Europe on official government business to meet with the King, meet with the Prime Minister of England, to meet with Macron. It's official business, and this reporter is saying, are you going to reimburse taxpayers for your trip? Let's just pick this up.
Prime Minister, thanks for taking my question, and welcome to Edmonton. And James from the Western Standard. You recently...
Sorry about the microphone.
Yeah, no problem. I'm a pretty tall guy. You have not been elected in a federal election yet, and you recently flew to Europe on government wide-body jet at the expense of at least $500,000. So the question I have for you today, and maybe I'll say this before I ask the question, these people around you all paid for that flight, and you've not been elected yet. So will you commit to refunding these taxpayers for that flight?
Well, it's an interesting question, way of framing it. Look, and I'm going to go back to, I'm going to allude to the question that was asked previously by Mr. Staples from the Journal, and the situation that we're in as a country, which is we are in an economic crisis that's brought on. I'm going to answer the question. Brought on by the tariffs that have been put on Canada, actual and prospective. One of the challenges...
The economic crisis was brought on by former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and you were his advisor at the time.
I think you would find...
These people did not create that problem.
I certainly... hey, nobody in Canada created that problem. Nobody in Canada created that problem. The U.S. government has decided to put tariffs on all of its closest allies. All of its closest allies. I wouldn't for a moment suggest that anyone in Canada is the cause of this. What our responsibility is to take action to react to a different world that we're in. And part of the way we do that is we build out new partnerships, new opportunities, including opportunities, and I'm going to give you a specific one, and then I don't know if you have one more follow-up, but I'll give you a specific example. It goes to my previous answer, something I also discussed with the Premier this morning, which is Canada has many advantages, and one of them is in critical metals and minerals. One of the issues is how are we going to develop the trade routes and the trade corridors rapidly in order to export those critical metals and minerals. And who are our clients for that? Who are our customers? Do we only have one customer to the south of us? The customer that's attacking us? That doesn't respect the trade agreements that they signed? Or should we develop new customers? New customers in Europe. What's required, if I may, what's required for those new customers is to build out trade corridors and infrastructure, including what I referenced in my previous answer and discussed with the Premier, is the potential to go north, go to new deepwater ports, Churchill as an example, Gray's Point in Nunavut as another, and that creates a whole new set of opportunities for Albertans as a whole, for people across the country, for these hardworking people around me and those like them in the trades. And that's what my job is.
I'll take that as a no then.
No, you'll take that as a very comprehensive answer to your question.
Thank you. Next question.
I'm going to editorialize for a moment. Donald Trump is not your friend, Canada. And these people who keep saying that Donald Trump is doing us some kind of a favor, be wary. Be very, very wary. I've got more coming back. Stay with me.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
I'm back. Yesterday, late in the day, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith also held a news conference, and she took this pretty strong stand against Mark Carney's new government. She says that she has this plan to strengthen a provincial law to protect the province's oil and gas infrastructure. She said amendments to Alberta's Critical Infrastructure Defence Act will classify oil and gas production sites as well as facilities holding emissions data as essential infrastructure. So this move aims to shield Alberta's energy sector from damage or obstruction. And she made it clear that the changes are designed to protect the province's energy security and economic interests from outside interference. And she specifically called out Ottawa as a potential threat, not the U.S. She also doubled down on a November decision to make greenhouse gas emissions data the exclusive property of Alberta's government in response to what she calls a federal oil and gas emissions cap imposed without warning. And so Smith, Alberta Premier, pointed to a 2022 incident in Saskatchewan where federal workers allegedly trespassed on private farmland to collect water samples. I remember that story as a reason for the crackdown. Smith says that the amendments will bar federal officials from provincial facilities, ensuring, in her words, that Alberta closes the door on similar overreach. And with those changes, Danielle Smith is sending a strong message that Alberta's energy future is non-negotiable. And in her view, the domain of the provinces of Alberta, not the federal government. And indeed, according to the way our Constitution is written, provinces do control their natural resources. But the truth of the matter is, in every case, every province still has to get their resources to market. And so you need to cooperate with other provinces in order to build pipelines and infrastructure. And this is the sticking point. And then you have the whole issue of transfer payments, equalization payments from one province to another, the have provinces to the have not provinces, in order to make sure that people across the country all have essentially equal access to public services and social safety nets. And Albertans resent having to send a large portion of their revenue to other provinces. But there are upsides and downsides, and we can get into that whole debate in more depth and look at it closer. In fact, I was kind of starting to write a Substack article about that very issue, taking a look at why Canada takes that approach, while in the United States they take a different kind of approach. But in the United States, the result is that, states retain a lot of their revenue for resources, but you get much larger inequality in income levels. You get it trickles down right systemically to much poorer provinces, say like Mississippi, versus richer or states like Mississippi, to richer states like Texas. And then even within those states, you have areas and communities that are much richer and other areas that are much less affluent, much poorer, even ghettos. And so you get more crime in these impoverished areas, and a lot more social problems, and a lot more violence. There are a lot of issues at play there. And I'll say this, my friends out in Alberta, be very careful what you endorse, what you even maybe vote for, if we get this, what would really be an illegal, in my view, referendum funded by American interests. Because, well, you may think that you're going to reap the benefits and come away much richer. This isn't an election where you're voting between Donald Trump and Mark Carney, or the United States and the 51st state option and Canada, and just give it a whirl, I've heard some people say. No, if it's done, it's done. It ain't going back. And if you don't think that there's U.S. money flowing in there, influencing this whole 51st state movement, you're kidding yourself. There's all kinds of corruption surrounding this. I can smell it. You can kind of see it. And it's kind of sickening. And it's all driven by greed and profit motive. And people who think that this is going to be like the answer to all your prayers. And they're out there talking about, and I'm editorializing, obviously, but people who think that this is going to solve all your problems because you're going to pay less in tax. Yeah, well, you're going to get less back in public service and maybe even stable communities. There are poor towns. There are poor people in Texas, too. I've spent time down there. Very affluent areas and very, very poor areas, too. And there are social issues like, and social programs like healthcare. And right now, Social Security is even under threat in the United States. Now, I'm a big advocate for free markets and lower taxation. But I also see the value in what we have here in Canada. And I see big corporations just ready to swoop into Alberta and the government, the U.S. government, ready to sweep into Alberta and just scoop up all those resources. They've had their eye on this for a long time. They've been working on this for a long time. This is not just something that Donald Trump came up with off the top of his head. It didn't start with that meeting between Trump and Trudeau in Mar-a-Lago where he called him the governor. It's been going on a long time before that. I showed you that about a month ago with the good general. And there's a whole campaign on or surrounding this right now. A lot of people just wringing their hands, waiting to line their pockets, scoop up all those resources. And I don't see Danielle Smith taking action to protect Alberta from a possible takeover from a foreign country. A country that has been essentially not just, you're blaming Ottawa for your pipeline problems. I think you ought to be looking a little further south and looking at the U.S. influence coming up into Canada. Who's funding these environmental activists? Who's funding these NGOs, these campaigns, and even First Nations people, some of them? Who's giving them money, maybe, to block your pipelines, protest? You think it's all a Canadian-made, homegrown problem? And, oh yeah, check your politicians too. And then look at who's funding them. And maybe we absolutely need a little more transparency. And you're all worried about Chinese influence? The number one threat to Canada right now, the biggest existential threat to our country, is in the White House. And the whole movement down there, it's just right out in the open. Wide open. You can see it. He's talking about it. Canada's meant to be the 51st state. The line, that boundary line, is just an imaginary line. I think I'll annex it. I'm going to use, quote, economic force to take it. Donald Trump is at war with Canada. It's not a conventional war. It's an economic war. At least that's the tool he's using. But Mark Carney is absolutely right. He's gone to war with all of the United States' traditional, long-standing allies since World War II. He's upsetting the apple cart, turning the world upside down, and Canada is first on his list. I told you a couple of years ago, almost 3 years ago, I said, Canada's in play. Somebody wants this country. They want to take us over. I couldn't quite figure it out. Who is it? And of course, it was just too hard to fathom that it might be the United States. It kept kind of pointing down there, and I just couldn't believe it. But here we are, folks. And some people cheering for it. Be careful what you let happen. Be careful what you ask for. You might just get it. You might just get it. I thought maybe we'd do a little TikTok scroll. How about that? And just look at what's being said over on TikTok, because that's a big source for political discourse, such as it is. I would say even propaganda, absolutely propaganda. Let's just scroll down and listen to some of what people are saying on TikTok.
Trump is going to have to come and talk. Okay, look, Mark Carney, the new Prime Minister of Canada, you said that there was absolutely no way that you would make Canada a 51st state, that Trump is going to have to come and talk to you sensibly. Well, guess what? Trump ain't coming to talk to you sensibly. He does not have the capability to do that. So get ready to make Canada the 51st state. What are you going to do? How are you going to stop this man from doing that? Because he wants Canada. He said he's coming for it. And he said that America won't need passports to get over there. So what plan do you have to stop Trump from making your country a 51st state? Because he is not going to talk to you sensibly. He is not going to talk to you respectfully. So what you going to do? I think it's going to be a 51st state. I really do.
You know the whole 51st state thing?
So I saw a lot of people making jokes about Canada becoming a state. And that's okay because I like jokes. I happen to find jokes very funny. But at a certain point, those jokes started to get serious. And I want to talk seriously for a second. Y'all don't want that. Y'all do not want Canada to be the 51st state. Now, have you even thought about what would happen? Because we're okay when we're little Canada over there. We make jokes at Canada. We laugh at Canada. We make fun of it, and that's cool. But once we're part of the family, dude, then motherfucker, we're big brother sitting atop the USA, the big boy state. Texas? That's little baby shit. You know what? We don't even need the oil, dude. Canada's coming with more oil. Texas, take the weekend off, bro. You're good. Yeah, take 5, take a lap. We got it handled. More land mass than the entire rest of the states combined. More coastline than the rest of the states combined. More forest. What's that freshwater supply? The Great Lakes? Bro, we own 84% of that in the Canadian state. Plus everything else we got. And we're the coldest motherfuckers in the country. Is that what you really want? You want Canada to get out of the corner and become part of the family and son you motherfuckers like that? Canada giving you nuggies, being like, what's up, little state? What's up, little dummy? Oh, yeah? You were number one? What? You guys speak French? You got French people in Louisiana? Tais-toi! We're coming through with millions more French. Anything you do at that point, any state out there, we got more of it. We got bigger of it. We got plentiful of it. You don't want that smoke, bro. God knew better than to make Canada a state. Trust me, dude. If we become a state, you don't want to get sunned on by Canada. Big boy state sitting on top of the country. We wouldn't be state 51. We'd be that number one state 50 times over. Plentiful with the resources, the coastline, the forested areas, the fresh water supply. Oh my gosh, boys, don't play with us. Don't play with us. Trust me, you're better off doing you and us doing us. Because if we come in there, oh my gosh, bro, we'll make you fucking little brother so fast. You don't want to...
This is breaking news. We just got a brand new report from the IMF, that's the International Monetary Fund, who looked at...
We'll go down here.
And here's my problem with Canada. Canada was meant to be the 51st state.
What the hell does that even mean?
Canada. You want to see why I want liberals to win? Okay, Pierre and Carney.
I can't keep running that because it's got copyrighted music.
ChatGPT saying that Alberta needs to leave and become the 51st state, and I can't stop because it just keeps blowing my mind. So,
okay, too much music.
Last week, I spent some time with 2 government officials for Canada. I was asking them how realistic is it that Canada would be the 51st state, and they told me there is a path. Alberta is first. And if they sign on, Saskatchewan would follow, and then you go west to British Columbia. There is a movement in Canada to join us. I want to get your thoughts on that and how that's proceeding.
So it's true. Thank you, Brian. It's true. A lot of people in Canada are liking becoming our beautiful, cherished 51st state.
Yeah, do you think that Trump knows about the movement? Do you think he might be tuned into that movement just a little bit? Do you think maybe he might have some connections into that movement? I don't know. Maybe we should be asking some questions about how tuned in Donald Trump is to the movement in Canada. Just saying.
They'll have to pay much lower taxes. They'll have the ultimate security. You know, they don't...
Anybody worried about foreign interference in Canadian politics? Everybody wants to name the names. Name the names. There's a name right there. What's one name coming right to mind? I'm just saying.
The president wants Canada. We got to make it very unappealing for him. You know what we got to do? We just got to bring in a ton of Mexicans, give them citizenship. Look how fast he builds a wall to separate the two countries.
And in fact, I don't think Donald Trump realizes how diverse the demographics are up here. I think in his mind, we're just very Snow White. Maybe not.
Trump has been calling to make Canada the 51st state, and a group in Alberta is apparently on board. Jeffrey Rath is leading that group, a lawyer from Alberta. He has that delegation behind him. Jeff, how big is your delegation? Tell me the feeling you are for joining America.
Hundreds of Albertans that are reaching out and volunteering to join our delegation. Right now, our group is very small. We're, it's a steering committee of people that are looking to come to Washington on an exploratory basis and meet with a representative appointed by President Trump to explore the benefits of either Alberta becoming an independent sovereign nation with economic union to the United States, becoming a U.S. territory, or becoming or pursuing full statehood.
Yeah, it's all random.
Yes, we're all invested here. Let's just keep going with this Chat GPT thing. I just asked, surely Albertans enact becoming the 51st state. So number one, Albertans have to demand a referendum. And you're hearing a lot of talks about this right now. And those lawyers that have gone down to Washington to basically make a case for us to Donald Trump. We need a referendum. There's no...
Oh, yeah. So, I told you they're going to try and attach a referendum to the election. And if you don't vote the right way, think Ukraine.
As you probably know, I say you can always become a state. And to be honest with you, Canada only works as a state. It does.
Blah, blah, blah.
Let's ask Chat GPT what's going to happen if Carney actually dissolves Parliament this coming up Sunday, because that is what the rumors are. Let's just get right into this.
It's going to happen. Yeah, he can't speak French.
Continues to call the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, Governor of Canada. I'm curious what he means by that, and if there are any plans that are moving forward with trying to make Canada the 51st state. And I have a follow-up on the economy as well.
Sure. Well, the president put that in his True Social account, or his True Social post earlier today. He feels strongly that it would be very beneficial for the Canadian people to be the 51st state of the United States. They wouldn't be paying for these tariffs. They'd have much lower taxes if they were.
Blah, blah, blah. And if you don't do it, we're going to use economic force to make you suffer. I don't think Trump... She seems too young to have that job to me, but maybe I'm just getting old. It just seems... Oh, my God. Anyway.
Joking anymore. Check out what he posted today. No one can answer why we subsidize Canada to the tune of $100 million a year. Makes no sense. Many Canadians want Canada to become the 51st state. They would save massively on taxes and military protection. I think it is a great idea. 51st.
He said 200 billion the other day. Now it's 100 million. He can't. 100 million, 200, whatever. It's a lot.
State. What do you think? Was Trump joking or is he being serious?
Yeah, we know he's serious.
Alexa.
Now. I told you from the very beginning that he was serious. I told you over almost 3 years ago that somebody was doing this. And I told you that Tucker Carlson wasn't joking when he came up here and said that he called the Prime Minister's office and said that he was coming up here to liberate Canada. I told you. And you think that there's nerds going on?
What happens to Canada in 2025?
In 2025, Canada will be struck by a mysterious winter storm causing over 35 feet of snow in certain parts of the country.
Okay, I don't know what the heck that is, but that ain't...
Okay, guys, so the myth of Canada, a.k.a.
Yeah, oh, yeah. You know, they want you to believe that Canada's not a real country. I'm sure this has nothing to do with what Donald Trump is doing. The myth is Canada. It's just its own thing. It's got nothing to do with the 51st state rhetoric. And I'm sure Donald Trump doesn't have anything to do with it. That's entirely homegrown, this.
Myth of Canada, aka Canada the Illusion, is circulating on YouTube right now. Everyone is rushing to go and watch it. But what exactly does it mean? You're like me and do not understand government lingo or the British North American Act or the Constitution and all of that monarchy mumbo jumbo. I'm going to break this down for you in like layman's terms, like grades.
Don't bother. If you don't understand it, how are you going to break it down in any way that's meaningful or accurate at all? Oh, man. They're preying on the ignorant with that. I've had people call. I'm so tired of it. The whole thing is designed to break your spirit. It is propaganda. It's a psyop. It's information warfare. That's what the Myth is Canada is. Get it? It's designed to demoralize you, to make you think that your country, first of all, isn't real, that it's not valid, that it's doesn't really exist. So therefore, why fight for something that isn't real? It is real. It is worth saving. It is not a myth. You're living it. We've been living it for over 150 years. The Myth is Canada is a lie.
You know how Trump said Canada should become the 51st state? I have the greatest response for Trudeau. All he has to say to Trump is, yeah, we'll become the 51st state. We just get to keep our healthcare system, education system, standing army, RCMP, Canadian dollar. The only difference is we get freedom of movement and zero tariffs. Then we'll become the greatest state in the world, Canada, USA. Not sure if you want the French people, but we'll throw it in anyways, baby.
A survey released by Ipsos today found that 43% of Canadians aged 18 to 35 would accept Canada becoming the 51st state if it meant having their savings and money translated into the US dollar, as well as being granted American citizenship. Now, I have no dog in the fight as one way or another on that. I'm still very undecided as to what is the best move forward for us as a nation. However, I do just want to explain why this phenomenon is occurring, why Canadians are willing to get rid of our country, essentially, and secede and become part of America. So this is because of Canada's national identity crisis. So first, what is an identity? The word identity itself can be traced back to two different words in Latin, which are essentias and identitum. Now, those words mean repeated in beingness. So your identity is your repeated beingness. And when it comes to a nation, same thing. So in simple terms, an identity is what does it mean to be Canadian? And for the last few decades, there has been a systematic dismantling of the Canadian identity. This actually can be traced back to the early 1980s when Trudeau Sr. implemented the world's first ever multicultural policy. We were the first nation ever to adopt a multicultural policy. And what this meant was that we shifted as a nation from being people that when immigrants landed here, we no longer expected to teach and have immigrants respect Canadian culture and values and assimilate them. Our policy then turned into making sure Canadians respected immigrants' cultures and made room for them. Now, again, I'm not even making a hard call one way or another. This is just facts as to what happened. Our mindset as a nation changed in the early 1980s to making sure that Canadians made room for other cultures, rather than those other cultures respecting Canadian culture. And so for decades now, like 40 years, 45 years, that policy has been in place and it's been eroding Canadian identity. I have a client who immigrated here, and actually he just said to me this weekend, we were having this conversation, and he was saying And when he first landed here, how surprised he was when he would talk to Canadians, because he wanted to know, like, hey, what am I expected to do here? Like, how am I expected to act? What does it mean to be Canadian? And Canadians couldn't answer that question. And it's because as our society hasn't been focused on that at all for 40 to 50 years, and it's left.
I'm going to disagree to some degree with what he's saying. It's sort of true, but not true. And in fact, Trudeau Sr. came on the political scene much earlier than the 1980s. You can go back to the 1960s, 1970s. When I was a kid, Trudeau Sr. was Prime Minister. And yes, he brought in more socialism. But Canada has never been like the United States. We've never been a melting pot. We've always been something of a mosaic. And you can go back to our very first Prime Minister, Sir John A. Macdonald, who made it very clear that Canada was not going to be a nation like the United States, a nation of conquering. He saw the bloodshed that led to the creation of the United States, and he absolutely wanted to avoid that. So we've always been a country of compromise and cooperation, not a country that goes around trying to conquer everybody. And that's why our history, even with First Nations, while certainly not without sin, it has been different. And we largely did cooperate with First Nations in a way that was much less violent than you had in the United States. And that's why during the War of 1812, we had some First Nations on our side fighting against the Americans, backing up the British Empire Loyalists. And we're really, in many respects, revisiting those same issues and fighting that battle all over again, at least for now, economically and culturally. But it isn't true that we were, at one point a melting pot like the United States, and then we became a mosaic under Trudeau. Multiculturalism certainly adopted more in an apparent or prominent way under Trudeau Sr. and the Liberals, especially during the 1970s, when we were trying to make the country grow and became more pro-immigration. But I'm not so sure that it's accurate to say that Canada doesn't have its own identity or even its own culture. I think we do. Can you think of another country like Canada? Even though Trudeau Jr. referred to Canada as a post-national state, which I never really appreciated. I still don't, because I believe in Canada as its own nation state. I believe we are a nation state, and I think that this has been a wake-up call even for the Liberals, and especially for Canadians who have taken the country for granted. That's maybe one of the defining things about Canada, is that we have been such a stable, prosperous, affluent country, welcoming, that we've taken it for granted. A liberal democracy, and I mean liberal in the classical sense, and even in a conservative sense, so stable, where we've never really had wars on the scale here that we've seen around the world. And then since World War II, living under the collective nuclear umbrella, not just the United States nukes, because those nukes don't belong just to the United States. They've always belonged really to all of Western society. And we've all worked together to build a peace in our own way, internationally. And that's all being blown up by Donald Trump, who sees the United States as the sole superpower on the Western side, rivaled only by Russia and maybe China now. But it isn't true. We've all worked together at that. And Canada always having to play the junior partner because we required, really, the United States to take the lead on being the superpower so that the world would not see a proliferation of nuclear weapons. And it worked for quite a while, but now as more countries acquire nukes and Donald Trump destabilizes things, you're going to see even more countries pursue them in order to assert their sovereignty in the face of a threat that is very present south of the border. Canada is its own nation state. We are a unique country. Unique because we have uniqueness within uniqueness. Newfoundland is a lot different than British Columbia. Northern Ontario is different than Southern Ontario, where we are very Americanized here and very Anglophonish. Although there are French communities, there's a French community 20 minutes from here. Alberta is different than Quebec. But together we've been stronger. And even Quebec knows that. That's why they never leave. Because they need Alberta. And I put it to you that Alberta needs the rest of Canada. And maybe Danielle Smith should try a little more diplomacy with Ottawa instead of swinging a big stick and complaining. It's wearing a little thin, honestly. Especially when I see the attitudes and the propaganda and the U.S. influence coming up here. Threatening the very existence of our country. It's China. It's China. Yeah, you know who talks about China all the time? Donald Trump, MAGA, the White House. China's the big threat. China's the big threat. Oh, don't worry about the United States. They're our friend. Yeah, he's not a threat. Yeah, he is. He's absolutely a bloody threat. We've never been threatened like this before. It's insulting. And it's high time, I think, the people out in Alberta acknowledged that. It's not an opportunity so much as it is an existential threat to the existence of our entire country. And, yeah, they may not be so friendly as you think because they've been exploiting Alberta this entire time, buying up your oil at a discount because they're saying to you every day, your oil ain't worth as much. We're not going to pay you market value because we're your only customer. How did that happen? Oh, yeah, it's all Ottawa's fault. I'm not so sure. And that's why in the thumbnail of the description of tonight's broadcast, Breaking Canada's Spirit was the headline for the thumbnail. Because we are being subjected to this massive information warfare campaign right now in order to twist people's minds and turn everything upside down and convince you that this country is not worth fighting for. Not in any way. They want you disarmed. Oh, yeah, you guys out there who want your gun rights. You don't want the government taking your guns away, disarming you. Well, you're being disarmed in another way. Psychologically. Propaganda. Old as strict in the book, but not so old now. Very new, sophisticated. We've been bombarded with this for a long time. And it is very sophisticated. And it's constant, 24/7, 365. One of the most weird, here's an example. I talked to you the other night about a video out there where the person who produced it said that Canada has been placed in probate, as if to suggest that the entire country is bankrupt, and Mark Carney has been brought in to lead the Liberals and the government in the process of liquidating all Canadian assets so that we can become the 51st state. And it was the stupidest video I'd seen in a long time, and yet highly effective. Stupid, and yet brilliant. Because while it makes no sense, it has no merit whatsoever, people believe it because it just sounds like it might be true. But if you're not a lawyer, how would you know? Or if you watch that stupid video, The Myth is Canada, and you're not a constitutional expert, they warp your mind. They trick you. It's a sleight of hand designed to distort your reality and actually even create a whole new reality for you. You don't believe me? Maybe you believe this guy because, like I've been telling, I shared it the other night, and it's still making the rounds, this stupid video, this brilliant, stupid piece of propaganda. It's not about the country being placed in probate. That's not what the purpose of the video is. The actual purpose is to undermine your belief in your very country, to disarm you with your most effective weapon, your brain, confuse you, to actually distort your reality and create a whole new one, and convince you that you've been lied to, and everything you think was true is not true at all, and your country doesn't even exist, and soon it's going to be liquidated. And it's not true. And even this video, the timeline deadline that he set out, and I think it's already passed, and it didn't come to pass, but people still question their very reality and the reality of their country. If you don't believe me, maybe you listen to this guy.
Video sent to me more than this one. Check this out.
It's a really big secret that the Canadian citizens, as well as the Americans, are not actually being exposed to or being told. And I'm going to expose to you right now why Mark Carney is actually in Canada. So it actually has to do with Canada being liquidated. Canada is in probate at the moment, which means that the Trust and Estate Administration, he's been appointed as executor on behalf of the Crown to basically liquidate probate.
As soon as I saw that it said Canada's in probate, I refused to watch the video. I've literally been sent this video, I think maybe 25 to 30 times at minimum, and I've never clicked on it once and I've never watched it. The only reason I watched it is because a friend of mine sent it to me. And that tells me that there is so much misinformation going on. That guy, in my opinion, has absolutely zero, and I mean zero idea what he's talking about. As much as I do not like Mark Carney myself, that's not why he's here. I don't even think he understands what probate means. In order for probate to happen, there needs to be a will. Someone needs to have died. Probate is the judicial process to basically prove the will that it exists. Who died in Canada? Who's this person that died in Canada, that owns Canada, that then justifies a probate and the will needing to be proved and all of our assets being given to him? Like, it's so... I couldn't even finish the video. I watched what you saw and I stopped because there's no point in me seeing the rest. It's like me sitting here talking in confidence and telling you that I'm telling you all the Earth is a man-made object. I know it. Because Einstein, I knew he knew it. Like, you can't just say these things and say it with confidence and expect to believe it. You have to question what you see on here. And so I wanted to get the record straight for everyone. Please, please do not worry about it. Canada is not under probate. We will never become the 51st state. And again, this is coming from someone who's a conservative, who is against Trudeau policies, who's against Mark Carney policies. That's how bad this misinformation is, that I'm even defending this. I'm literally, in a way, I'm defending the Liberals, which is weird to say, but he's wrong.
He's in a meeting with...
I know! I know! Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for producing that video. Thank you. You see how bad it's gotten? I have to defend the Liberals. It's just blah.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
The other thing is, I have to, as much as I'd prefer to have a conservative government personally, right? Because I really want a smart guy right now in power. And whether it's a liberal or a conservative, and if I find out any of these people, if I find out Poilievre is corrupt or if he's on the whatever, I won't vote for him. I'm not even sure I can vote for the conservatives here because I don't really much care for the guy who represents the conservatives, who is the elected member of parliament. But that's another story. But the thing is, people are just the smear campaign, of course, right, is so heavy right now against Carney, and it has been for 6 months or so. That I don't know, people just lose their minds. They get triggered over these things. But I have to say, I'll put Carney up against Trump any day of the week. I don't know about you, but seems to me that it makes sense, especially during a time of economic crisis, to have somebody who understands economics and finance and how central banks work, maybe at the helm. And Carney, I think, is too much on the environmental side for me, but okay, whatever. But on the finance side, he's more conservative than Trudeau, and he has the credentials. I mean, he is a smart guy, extremely well educated. I just looked up some of his credentials. You know, he has an education in economics. He earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in economics from Harvard in '88. He graduated with honors. And then he pursued graduate studies at Oxford in the United Kingdom. I mean, this guy has an Ivy League education. He's a smart guy. At Oxford, he completed a master's degree in economics in '91. That's not an easy thing to get. And later a doctorate in economics in '95. His doctoral research focused on topics related to international finance and monetary policy, areas that would, later come around and define his professional career. And look at his resume. Governor Bank of Canada, Governor Bank of England, and I know the videos out there. I think it was Liz Truss who said that he bankrupted England during the 2008, was it the 2008 financial crisis? That's not true. It's not true. That's a political hit job from her. And Carney did not bankrupt the UK. Is the United Kingdom bankrupt? Are they in probate? No. Everybody was suffering during the economic downturn in 2008. Or actually, no, I'm sorry. He was Bank of Canada governor in 2008 and was until 2013. And we did navigate through that. In fact, Canada did, better than a lot of the other G7 countries during the 2008 financial crisis. We got hit pretty hard. I remember because I went through it. My business suffered as a result of that because people just pulled back on spending. And, it was a tough time for everybody, especially in the U.S. The real estate market suffered down there immensely, but that was because of a lot of the U.S. Policies related to the way loans were being given out through government mandates or regulations requiring banks to give loans to people who really couldn't afford them based on social reasons, really. Another story. And then he was the governor of the Bank of England from 2013 to 2020. And he didn't bankrupt England as the governor of the Bank of England. The UK is still humming along. They've been there a long time. They're going to continue to be there for a long time. And then, he did have a stint at Goldman Sachs. And so, I mean, if we end up with a liberal government, and it could happen, and I'll show you why in a minute, it could easily happen. If we end up with that, I'd rather have Carney in the Prime Minister's office right now in this time of economic crisis than Trudeau, because Carney is one sharp guy when it comes to economics and finance. You may not agree with their approach as a liberal government, but at least he's smart. He understands how the system works. So, And Poilievre, I mean, he's a pretty sharp guy, too. But he's not an economist. He's educated in international relations. He has a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Calgary. And he's a sharp public speaker, probably would be effective in negotiations, but he's not an actual economist. I think that... in his studies, he's probably studied economics to some degree. But he doesn't have like a master's in economics or a PhD or anything like that. He seems to have a pretty good grasp on things, but he doesn't have the credentials that Carney does in that area. He's been a politician pretty much from the beginning, always working in politics. And, he was elected as an MP in 2004 at a very young age, 25. And he, for a while, co-owned some sort of a polling and consulting company called 3D Contact, Inc. And so he was involved in public opinion analysis, and that also is, very much in the political world. And he's been a Minister of Employment, Social Development, Shadow Minister for Finance as well. So he has some experience in that way, but not an actual finance minister. Nevertheless, I think he would be quite competent in the job. His economic philosophy seems to be influenced heavily by the same kinds of influences I've had, like coming from economists and free market thinkers like Milton Friedman, and in my case, Adam Smith. So, either way, I think Canada is not in bad shape in terms of sending somebody down there to negotiate with Trump at the end of this election. And as I said, why? Well, because all you have to do is look at what they've elected on the U.S. side. The only reason Trump is getting as much traction with the 51st state stuff as he is because there's just a big country and they've got so much weight behind them, and they've been the dominant economic force around the world especially since World War II, and they've got nukes. So he throws his weight around, but it's not his weight; it's the weight of the United States. And he's abusing that power, in my view. But that's okay, because the guys we're going to send down to negotiate with this guy, I think we've got the upper hand, because I'll put our economist or our international thinker and Pierre Poilievre and negotiator up against the garbage man any day of the week. No problem. We've got those Ivy League educated guys going up against the guy in the garbage truck.
How do you like my garbage truck?
It's beautiful, Donald. Art, we're sending our guys down. We're going to talk. Yeah, I'll be right back.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, and if you don't want a liberal government, you're not going to like what I'm going to show you right now. Not at all. I just told you we could end up with liberal government. Remember a while back I said don't count those liberals out because they've got a massive machine. They have a ton of money. They're organized. They got their crap together, man. They always do. Even when they're down, they're never out. They always seem to claw back. And the Conservatives, I don't know what's in Canada, they always seem to find a way to self-destruct. It was Poilievre's election to lose, and he may well be on the road to defeat. Let me show you the 338 poll. It's not entirely Poilievre's fault, mind you. It's just because of the way the cookie is crumbling. Here it is. Look at this. Oh, hang on. Close that. There's the poll. My goodness, how fortunes have changed. Federal projections, if the election were to be held today, the Liberal Party of Canada would get 178 seats, according to this poll. Conservatives now at 130, behind, losing the Bloc Québécois 25 seats, the NDP 8, and the Greens 2. What a turnaround. And this is because of Trump. And he says he'd rather deal with a liberal, which is reverse psychology. He clearly would rather have a conservative government, I think. Although, it's easier for him to target the Carney-Trudeau liberal machine because he's absolutely at war with that ideology, progressivism. So it's easier for him to ramp up the rhetoric. Not so easy when you have somebody in power, when you're trying to take over the country and you're agreeing with them. But I don't even know anymore who to trust, because everything is upside down. Everything is twisted. There's so much corruption out there, so much foreign interference going on in Canada right now from multiple countries, including the United States, that I don't know who's clean and who's corrupt, whose motivations are pure and who's acting in bad faith. Help me out, because it's just very difficult to see it. But things are becoming clearer day by day. We're seeing what, not just the politicians, but, people who are politically active as well. Their actions are speaking louder than their words have in the past, and they can't remain cloaked and in the shadows forever. Their true intentions are slowly bubbling to the surface, and we're slowly beginning to see what the true motivations have been for the past few years. And it really does seem to be a plan, doesn't it? Can't stop the plan. Trust the plan. Of course, everything's a plan. They planned this. You think Donald Trump just came up with this one day off the top of his head, and Justin Trudeau went down there and he just decided to call him governor, and then it blew up into this? Organically? No. You don't take over a country just by insulting a prime minister. You do it using economic force and other weapons of modern combat. Today, the current Bank of Canada governor was speaking in Calgary, and I misspoke earlier. Macklem was in Calgary. Carney was in Edmonton. Sorry about that. I said that he was in Calgary. But the Bank of Canada governor speaking to, I believe this was I think this was the Chamber of Commerce. Let me just check. Economic Development, Calgary Economic Development Department. So let's go to that. We're just going to run a little bit of his speech there today, and he's addressing this very issue and what Canada is doing through the bank and monetary policy, fiscal policy. Here we go.
Well, Geraldine, Joe, thank you very much for that introduction. And it's great to be in Alberta. Thank you for having me. Thank you to Calgary Economic Development. The last time I spoke in Calgary was about 18 months ago. It was September 2023. The post-pandemic crisis was easing. Uncertainty, yes, uncertainty remained, but it was coming down. Inflation was still above 3%, and the Bank of Canada's policy interest rate was 5%. Canadians were being squeezed by still elevated inflation and higher interest rates. I think the question on everybody's mind, including ours, was could we get inflation back to our 2% target without tipping the economy into recession? Well, as 2024 closed out, this question was largely resolved. Inflation was on target, and economic growth had picked up. The Canadian economy was in good shape. Inflation came down through the first half of last year and had been close to 2% since last summer. As the bank's governing council became more confident that inflation was on track to return to target, we began reducing our policy interest rate starting last spring. Substantial rate cuts through the rest of the year boosted household spending, and economic growth picked up to 2.2% in the third quarter and 2.6% in the fourth quarter. Employment growth also strengthened in November through January, and the unemployment rate came down.
the Canadian economy managed a soft landing. Unfortunately, we're not going to be on the tarmac for very long. We now face a new economic crisis. Since President Trump began threatening to impose a wide range of tariffs on Canadian exports, uncertainty has increased sharply. And depending on the extent and duration of tariffs, the economic impact could be severe. The uncertainty is already causing harm. There's a lot we don't know. Some new tariffs are in place on steel, aluminum, as well as goods not in compliance with the Canada-US-Mexico agreement. We don't know how long these tariffs will last. And we don't know if tariffs will broaden to other sectors. In the last 2 months, the U.S. administration has twice imposed and then retracted universal tariffs on all imports from Canada and Mexico. President Trump has also threatened to extend tariffs to a wide range of industries, including autos, semiconductors, and pharmaceuticals. And he has recently repeatedly said new reciprocal tariffs are coming on April 2nd on many countries, although it's really not clear exactly what that means. Most disturbing of all for Canadians, President Trump has threatened our sovereignty, repeatedly referring to Canada as the 51st state. There can be no question about our sovereignty or our border. Last month, I gave a speech about the effects of broad-based tariffs on the Canadian economy. And today I want to advance the discussion in 3 ways. First, I want to discuss what tariffs could mean for specific sectors and specific regions of the country. Second, I'll talk about the impacts of uncertainty caused by on-again, off-again tariffs and threats of more to come. Canadian businesses and households are doing their best to navigate the unpredictability of U.S. policy. That uncertainty is affecting our economy. And finally, I'll talk about how the bank is navigating monetary policy in the face of unusual uncertainty. Monetary policy cannot solve a trade war, and we can't make the uncertainty go away. But we can make sure that we don't add to it by ensuring inflation remains anchored on our 2% target. Canadians are worried about trade uncertainty. We don't want them to worry about inflation as well. So, with that, we've got a lot of ground to cover. So here we go. In my speech last month, I outlined how the universal tariffs on Canada and Mexico that were threatened by President Trump could impact the Canadian economy. I outlined the channels and broad impacts of a 25% tariff on non-energy exports, 10% on energy, together with the retaliatory tariffs proposed by the Canadian government. Our economic models predict that exports and business investment would decline sharply. The economy would work less efficiently, and we would earn and consume less. Higher tariffs would also increase prices, causing inflation to rise for a period, as the upward pressure on prices from higher costs would outweigh the downward pressure from a weaker economy. Since that speech in February, the level and timing of tariffs have changed several times, and there are far too many unknowns to predict what happens next. But we do know that the tariffs and the uncertainty, if they are maintained, will particularly hurt a few key sectors. And that will have a big impact on Canada's regional economies, including here in Western Canada. Now, as those of you in the room know all too well, for Alberta, the hit to the energy industry from a 10% tariff is a major concern. It's also a big issue for Midwest U.S. refineries that have invested heavily in equipment to refine heavy Canadian oil. Roughly 94% of Canadian crude oil exports go to the United States, mostly through north-south pipelines. The launch of the Trans Mountain Expansion Pipeline has increased the access of Canadian oil to overseas markets, and new LNG export capacity is coming online. And this is helping to diversify the markets for Canadian energy exports. But these investments were designed to augment our export capacity, not replace U.S. demand. Looking ahead, U.S. tariffs could put downward pressure on Canadian energy prices and reduce the profitability of Canadian energy producers, at least until other markets can be expanded. The hit to profits combined with uncertainty means that investment will likely drop and employment could follow. I know Albertans have lived through the boom and bust commodity cycles before, indeed for many generations. But a threat to the Canada-U.S. energy relationship is not something we've ever had to contemplate. The other prairie provinces are also being affected. The United States has temporarily exempted fertilizers, including potash, from tariffs, and they've lowered the planned tariffs from 25% to 10% for non-compliant exports. But uncertainty remains. Spring seeding will soon begin, and farmers on both sides of the border are already feeling pressure from low grain prices. U.S. farmers import potash from Saskatchewan to add potassium to their soil. Canadian farmers often need U.S. phosphate to fertilize their crops. Other tariffs will have impacts too. Canadian farmers buy a lot of machinery and equipment from the United States. And China has said it will impose a 100% tariff on Canadian canola oil and meal effective today. China is the top market for Canadian canola. The export value is close to $5 billion. It's a very difficult situation so close to planting season and adds to the uncertainty Canadian farmers are already facing. Other parts of the country, particularly Ontario and Quebec, will be disrupted by 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum. In 2024, the United States imported a quarter of its steel and 40% of its aluminum from Canada. Canada imported a quarter of its steel and a fifth of its aluminum from the United States. These cross-border flows mean that these sectors will be hit by both U.S. tariffs and counter-tariffs. It's going to hurt output, and it's going to raise prices. Now, monetary policy cannot target specific industries or regions. We have one monetary policy for the country. But to assess the overall implications of new tariffs, it is critical we understand their impacts industry by industry and how this is affecting and spilling over across regions. The bank's regional offices across the country in Halifax, Montreal, Toronto, Calgary, and Vancouver gather economic intelligence across industries and economic regions. And I'm very pleased to be joined by Farouk Suvankanlov, head of our Calgary regional office, which covers the Prairies and Northwest Territories. Our Calgary office is actually our second largest after our headquarters in Ottawa. Now, beyond the impacts of tariffs, the pervasive uncertainty created by the sudden and unpredictable shifts in U.S. trade policy is affecting both the Canadian and the U.S. economies. Trade policy uncertainty measures such as this one shown in Chart 1 have spiked in recent months. After more than 50 years of highly predictable trade policy, there was a sharp increase in uncertainty during President Trump's first term in office. But that uncertainty doesn't come close to what we see now. There are at least two kinds of uncertainty related to U.S. tariffs. There's uncertainty about the tariffs themselves, which tariffs will actually come to pass, and how long will they last. There's also uncertainty about the economic impacts of tariffs. We've not had to grapple with such large, broad-based tariff increases since the 1930s. So let me elaborate. Consumer confidence has fallen sharply in both Canada and the United States. After recovering through last year, the Conference Board of Canada's Index of Consumer Confidence fell to its lowest level on record in March, amid the chaos around U.S. tariffs. And the University of Michigan survey of U.S. consumers also declined, with sentiment now at 2.5-year lows. Last week, the Bank of Canada published new survey data on what we're hearing from households and businesses. Canadians told us they have become more worried about their jobs and financial security, and they intend to pull back on their spending. That's particularly true for workers in industries that rely on trade, including manufacturing, mining, oil, and gas. Businesses have lowered their sales outlooks, notably in manufacturing and in sectors that are sensitive to consumer spending. Some businesses report that credit has become harder to access. And with a weaker Canadian dollar, the cost of imported machinery and equipment has risen. Businesses are telling us they are delaying or canceling investment projects, and they're scaling back on hiring. Uncertainty is also affecting businesses' pricing decisions. Businesses have told us they face new costs associated with sourcing new suppliers, finding new markets, and managing their inventories. The majority of businesses plan to pass on these costs, as well as the direct costs of any new tariffs, to the prices of the goods they sell. Our surveys also find that near-term inflation expectations have risen in Canada as businesses and consumers brace for higher prices. Short-term inflation expectations of U.S. consumers have also risen materially for the first time since 2022. Finally, this uncertainty is taking a toll in financial markets. Equity prices are down sharply in the last few weeks, particularly in the United States. U.S. stock market indices have fallen about 10% from their recent peaks, and bond yields in both Canada and the United States have come down. Markets are revising down their growth outlook for North America. The damage caused by tariff uncertainty has started on both sides of the border. Now, even if and when we know what tariffs will be imposed, it's going to be hard to know exactly how consumers and businesses will react. It is clear that higher tariffs mean less demand, they mean weaker growth, and they mean higher inflation. The mechanics of tariffs are straightforward. Tariffs on Canadian exports will be paid by the U.S. company buying those goods, and that company will pass at least some of the cost onto U.S. consumers. The same goes for retaliatory tariffs on goods Canada imports from the United States. What is less clear is how much tariffs will dent demand and how much of the tariff will get passed on to consumer prices. Will U.S. buyers continue to buy imported Canadian goods when tariffs are added to the bill? Well, if you're buying something that you can't get anywhere else, well, maybe you're willing to accept a 25% price increase. But even then, you're going to buy less of it. And if there are substitutes for the thing you're buying, well, you're going to switch, and Canadian exports could fall a lot. The impact of tariffs on consumer prices will be affected by the strength of demand. In our recent survey, about half of businesses said they intended to raise prices as they cope with higher costs related to both tariffs and uncertainty. And 3/4 of those said they would pass most of the cost increase on to their customers. Now, these intentions may change as economic conditions evolve, and we're certainly going to be monitoring business intentions closely. The uncertainty about the pass-through of higher costs to consumer prices is of particular importance to monetary policy. Our mandate is price stability. Low inflation is the best way we can support Canadians in good times and in bad. So we're watching closely how the costs of tariffs and uncertainty pass through to consumer prices. This chart 2, illustrates the sensitivity of inflation to different assumptions about the speed at which higher tariffs pass through.
Okay, we're getting into more technical stuff, so I'm not going to continue with it because it may just be a little bit too academic for everybody here tonight. But the bottom line is, we're doing our best as a country, and we'll find a way to cope with this and to fight back and assert our strength and our sovereignty. I'll be right back.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals. individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at Freedom Reporters now. Tomorrow, maybe too late, too late, too late, too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
So, Donald Trump today announced that he is proceeding. This sounds so stupid, but I guess there's a method to the madness. Let's make America stupider again. He's abolishing the Department of Education.
Today we take a very historic action that was 45 years in the making. In a few moments, I will sign an executive order to begin eliminating the Federal Department of Education once and for all. And it sounds strange, doesn't it? Department of Education, we're going to eliminate it, and everybody knows it's right. And the Democrats know it's right, and I hope they're going to be voting for it because ultimately it may come before them. But everybody knows it's right, and we have to get our children educated. We're not doing well with the world of education in this country, and we haven't for a long time. And today we take.
We're not doing well with the world of education in our country. It's just. Oh, he's getting rid of the Department of Education because of the culture war. Mostly, that's really what it is. The war on woke. So just do away with the whole Department of Education. I get it, and it's the school choice thing and all of that. I know. To me, it just sounds stupid. It's a different approach. We'll see how it goes. I'm a little nervous about letting exposing all those kids to that thing, and that just seems so contrived. All the kids at their desks that they set up there, sitting at their school, it's all fake. It's all fake. The kids at the desks, yeah, they're going to school at the White House or wherever they held that news conference, and then they just had his podium set up. It's also contrived. It's like it's reality television. These news conferences. But that's the new reality out there, I guess. Yeah, and the new reality is reality TV. So, yeah. Oh, and then there's this story here I wanted to mention tonight too. This dude out in Vancouver. Rob Frith is his name. Let me bring up the headline here. He found this demo tape of the Beatles from 1962. And this is like a demo reel that get made for like Decca Records, I guess. So he's out there in Vancouver. He owns a record shop. And somehow he came into possession of this thing. And I guess it looks like it's authentic. Here, I'm going to show you. Instead of that, I'll bring up this article. What a crazy story. And what a find. It's like, it's pretty amazing, really. There. This is from the Vancouver Sun. Rare and valuable Beatles recording turns up in Vancouver record store. Jack Hirshhorn said he got the tape in London in 1968 or 69 from a well-known record producer who he declines to name. And then a few years ago, it says here, Rob Frith of Neptune Records bought a reel-to-reel tape labeled Beatles Demo. And he didn't bother to actually listen to it. He just assumed someone had put a Beatles bootleg on the tape. He says, quote, "I've had that Beatles thing sitting at the store for years. Last week, he was transferring some tapes at broadcaster Larry Hennessy's recording studio and brought along the Beatles tape. And then all of a sudden, it was like the Beatles are in the room playing," he said. And the quality was that good. Turns out it really was a Beatles demo, a legendary session that they recorded on January 1st, 1962 for Decca Records. And then Decca didn't sign the Beatles. Oops, big mistake. Instead, they went with EMI. And this tape features the Beatles' original drummer, Pete Best, not Ringo Starr. It's that early in the band's history. And this tape includes covers for songs like Money, To Know Him Is to Love Him, The Sheikh of Araby. And I'm not going to play you the tunes because I don't want a copyright strike. But there are... What else does it say here about this? Yeah, this is interesting. So Tom Lavin of the Powder Blues Band, which I kind of liked when I was a kid, and he's from Western Canada in Vancouver, and he said he replied to a posting about this online and says that the Decca tape used to be at the Can-Base Studios at 1234 West 6th in Vancouver, and then that became Mushroom Studios. That's where Ann and Nancy Wilson recorded, if I recall correctly, from the band Heart. A lot of big musicians recorded out there, and so that lends a lot of credibility to the story. And I would say that right there, you know, that endorsement or acknowledgement from Tom Lavin, great guitar player, by the way, shows that it's probably very authentic and pretty cool story. So that's like going to a yard sale or the equivalent of that and finding a master's painting like a Degas or something like that. Look, honey, I found this Degas copy at this yard sale. Well, in this case, it's a Beatles demo reel. So this guy says that he doesn't even know if he would sell it, but he says if Paul McCartney shows up and wants the tape, he'll give it to him for free. It's got to be worth a couple of dollars. So we'll see where all of that goes. Just going to pop into the chat here for just a moment. I haven't looked at all tonight. Let me just... it's not easy for me to look in the chat because it doesn't flow these days. Yeah. In through the studio system, so I have to actually go to the channel myself. Yeah, Lindy says she remembers that Hart played at your grade 8 sock. They what? Hart played at your grade 8 sock hop? That's amazing. That is amazing. Look how they're huge. Yeah. I remember going to a concert when I was a teenager out in Vancouver when I was visiting my brother, and it was so loud, my ears were practically popping. It was really, really bad for you. I don't know. It was so bad it hurt my ears. I don't know. My ears were practically bleeding. How is that pleasurable? I've never understood that. It was an outdoor concert at a sports stadium, and it was just like loud. Oh my God. It was like all these different bands. There was, I was so young. Blue Oyster Cult. Heart was there. And then that Tom Lavin came out to play with Heart on the stage. Ted Nugent played. I can't remember all the bands. It was a whole bunch of bands that weekend. And I went to that thing. I was so young. But I didn't get corrupted. I was a good kid. Maybe a little too boring. That's okay. I'm glad I didn't get corrupted. What else is going on in the chat over here in Rumble? Yeah, CBC Brown says, it'll be the greatest education system, greater than anyone has ever seen. I said, wow, what a great education system. Yeah, very Trump. It'll be the biggest, it'll be the best. The smartest education system of the most smartest of the best in the education world ever. Like you've never seen before. The likes of which you've never seen an education system before, now that we've eliminated it. I guess the whole idea here is just to give control over to the states more. I don't know. It's just whatever, man. I can't keep track of all the crazy stuff that's going on down there. At least he knows how to drive that truck. He's always got a backup plan. If the whole president of the United States thing doesn't work out, he can always get a job driving a garbage truck. I don't know what Trudeau's doing these days. Anybody know what Justin is up to now that he's not the Prime Minister of Canuckistania? I don't know what he's probably taking a little vacay. I hope he's not doing it at the taxpayer's expense. And what a price tag. If that's true, $500,000 to go over to Europe, I understand, because, you know, when he's the Prime Minister, you have to have security, you have to have, you know, all the pomp and circumstance, and your you know, the whole crew has to go when you're the PM. I get it. But $500,000? Couldn't they just be a little more frugal? I don't. If I was the Prime Minister, I wouldn't be spending that kind of cash on travel. I don't think. I guess you have to roll in the wages of everybody that you take with you, and yeah. I'd be more Trump-like. I'd be like ordering McDonald's for sure, not 5-star meals on the airplane and champagne. No, I'd have a little more respect for the taxpayers. So let me just check in the YouTube chat if I can. Let me see. Hello, everybody over there in YouTube land tonight. Oh, I can't see it. I can't see it. Before we go, let's just take a little bit of a moment here to bring Charlie Angus up. A few people sent me a notification about Charlie Angus speaking again today about the Trump tariff threats and the 51st state stuff. And, of course, he's leading the charge on at least one front of, this effort to preserve Canada's sovereignty as a nation state. Here he is today.
Unceded territory of the Algonquin Nation. Over the last 3 months, our nation has faced an unprecedented threat from our nearest neighbor, a threat to our borders, a threat to our sovereignty, our threat to our very right to exist as an independent democratic nation. Donald Trump thought we were going to be an easy mark, that we'd be a pushover. Oh, how wrong he was. And now Canada standing up to him has made Canada the front line in the defense against the MAGA ideology. So no wonder Donald Trump and MAGA are feeling pretty angry at Canada. But what concerns me is the targeting of Canadian citizens who are crossing the border to work or to visit. We have seen too many stories of citizens being pulled out of airport lines and being fingerprinted and deported as though they were criminals. Citizens being kidnapped through illegal detention by ICE. And it's not just Canadians. We see the attack on backpackers, students, doctors, professors. I am here today to say to Canadians to avoid travel to the United States if at all possible, and to call our government to stand up for our Canadian citizens who are being denied their rights by arbitrary detention. in the United States today. The Canada must stand up for our citizens and for the rule of law. Because what we're seeing, for example, with cops pulling over the folk duo Cassie and Maggie to harass them for being Canadian, is not the actions of a democratic nation. People whose phones are being seized and searched for any kind of incriminating evidence that they're somehow progressive or woke, that's not the actions of a democratic nation. That is the creep of totalitarianism, that is the creep of fascism, and we need to call that out. Because that is not what happens in a nation governed by the rule of law. It's been pretty clear that what Donald Trump and the MAGA ideology are focused on is the politics of fear, of keeping their people disoriented and frightened of the border, frightened of their neighbors. And to make that possible, it's become clear that Donald Trump is willing to drive his nation's economy into chaos, to rip up the biggest and best trading partnership in the world, to drive the U.S. travel industry into the ground. Last month alone, there were 500,000 less visits to the United States because Canadians are not going to go to hostile territory. And so what do the stories of arbitrary detention and arrest and throwing young women into freezing cells, handcuffed, send? It sends that the United States does not want to be involved in the world economy anymore. And what we're seeing is that Donald Trump is trying to break the incredible bonds that exist in all our border communities, the bonds that have existed between Americans and Canadians for years, for generations, the deep friendships that we have. He's trying to make us the enemy of the American people. Well, Canada is not the enemy of the American people, but we are the enemy of fascism, and we are the enemy of the Donald Trump ideology. Canada is showing the world what it means to stand up, and ordinary Canadians are in the lead in this fight, and I'm super proud to call myself Canadian at this time. But it is vital that our leaders join this fight with us, that our leaders call out the arbitrary detentions and the denial of rights of citizens, not just Canadian citizens, but all citizens. Because we know if he can get away with this, there's no reason that a Canadian or German or someone from the UK isn't going to be picked up and deported to some El Salvadorian concentration camp, because that is what's happening in the United States with the complete abdication of the rule of law. Canada is a country of the rule of law. Canada is a country of democracy. Canada must stand firm at this time. I urge people not to travel to the United States, but to keep the boycott, to keep strong, because Canada will never kiss that gangster's ring. We are true, we are north, we are strong, we are free, we will not bend, and we will not give an inch. I'll take any questions.
Okay, enough. If you want to watch that, it is available online. And never thought I'd see the day when people would be afraid to go to the United States. Even I am afraid to go to the United States right now. That's true. I will, I'm going to dip into the chat. What do you guys want to hear for a closing song tonight? You want to hear the Snowflake song again, or do you want to hear Orange Rag? Maybe I'll just pick. Okay? Just dipping into the chat, just looking here. Yeah, Crickshank, no, they've been detaining Canadians down there as well who are not criminals, and they've been deporting and detaining American citizens as well. You're just not opening your eyes. And that is the truth. I've even seen a story about a young girl, an American citizen, a child, who was detained, scooped up as part of their immigration sweeps, brain cancer. Oops, mistake, unacceptable. Yeah. And just like all of us, a child like that is someone that needs to be protected. When you're the strongest, if you want to be a real leader, it's your obligation to take care of those who are weak. Because we're all valuable, even the weakest of us. And when we stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves, sometimes the weakest lift us all up and make us all stronger. And together, we're invincible. Each of us individuals supporting each other. All for one, one for all. One for all for one. We're all just a bunch of misfits around here. Each one of us unique, just like a snowflake. Love you guys. See y'all tomorrow night. 7 p.m. Eastern on the flip side.
Drifting down without a sound, a gentle touch upon the ground. No two the same, yet side by side, like you and me in this great tide. Like a fingerprint from God, frozen tears from up above. Each one special, each one rare, a fleeting wonder light as air. Here for a moment, then melting away. Gone in the sunlight, lost in the day. Taken for granted, so easy to miss. Like life itself, so fragile as this. A million fall, yet each stands true. A perfect shape, a different hue. Just like us, no two alike. A spark of life, a soul in flight. Like a fingerprint from God, frozen tears from up above. Each one special, each one rare, a fleeting wonder light is air. Here for a moment, then melting away. Gone in the sunlight, lost in the day. Taken for granted, so easy to miss. Like life itself, so fragile as this. A million falling, yet each stands true. A perfect shape, a different hue. Just like us, no two alike. Like life itself, so fragile as this. Like you, like me, we shine, we fade. Yet every soul is beautifully made. A moment to love, a moment to stay. Before we drift, before we stray. Cherish the snowflakes, here only for a moment, then melt away.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.